we're going to do a poem that, we're not going to do a song from Zmirot, but we're going to do something that has to do with Shabbat anyway. So as usual, the shiurim are dedicated in memory of Elisheva Frist, Elisheva Sima Bat Zalman, Zechona Livracha. Shalom. Welcome back, Hallie. I had this on one of the pages earlier on Yom Zeh Mechubad. I've made reference to it, but we didn't really do it. The issue is Hoshana. It's Chag Sukkot. So we're a little bit far away from Sukkot, but you'd be surprised. Time flies, and my wife just stopped saying Kaddish for her mother, and soon it'll be the yahrzeit. Can't believe a year has passed. Time moves very, very quickly. I used to think just airplanes fly, but I found out that also time flies, and that's the way it is. So it'll soon be Sukkot. That's all. You'll see. You'll take a deep breath. What? No, we're not skipping over Pesach. We're going to have Pesach. We'll have Shavuot. We'll have Rosh Hashanah. We have Yom Kippur, and bingo, we'll get to Sukkot. And at Sukkot, aside from the mitzvah of the 7 species, Arbat Aminim, Lulav and Esrog, we also have the addition to our davening called the Hoshana Tefillah. Now, Hoshana, as the words mean, please help us. It's a supplication, it's a plea, it's a scream, it's a kvetch, Hatzilu in modern Hebrew. So what are we asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to help us? So the Mishnah tells us in the first parak of Masechet Rosh Hashanah, that u'b'chag nidonim alamayim. On Chag HaSukkot, we are judged for rainfall. We are judged for how much rainfall we're going to have during the season. So in essence, the season for beginning of rainfall of the new year begins on the first day of Chag HaSukkot. Now, we know we say Geshem on the last day. Now, that's a machloket in Masechet Ta'anit. There's an opinion that actually says we ought to begin Mashav Ruach Mar Geshem on the first day of Sukkot. Rabbi Yeshua says the last day of Sukkot, and the reason is you don't want a Kadosh Baruch Hu to take note that we need rain on Sukkot, because we don't want rain on Sukkot. We want to sit in the sukkah and not have to run away from the sukkah because of rainfall. So we delay the Mashav Ruach Mar Geshem until Shmini Atzeret, where there's no longer a mitzvah for sitting in the sukkah. Now, of course, in Chutz La'aretz, there is a rabbinic mitzvah to sit in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeret because of Yom Tov Sheni of Hoshana Rabbah, except that, so if it's only rabbinic and an OUisrael and Eretz Yisrael does not sit in the sukkah, who cares if it rains on Shmini Atzeret, right? So we have the great Paitan, we're going to get to him in a moment, Rabbi Elazar Kalir, most probably of the 7th century Eretz Yisrael. And why I say most probably? Because there are those who think that he is somebody to be associated with one of the Tanaim in the Mishnah, Rabbi Eliezer, and some say he's actually later in the 13th century. So there's a whole, as they say in Chinese, Geschäft. There's a whole Geschäft. There's a whole issue of when he lived. But most people put him at the 7th century. He's quoted by Rashi, so he certainly can't be the 13th century. See, he's earlier than Rashi. Okay, Rashi is the 11th century. The Rashi is even earlier than 11th, the late end of the 10th, the 11th century, Rashi, correct? So Rabbi Elazar Kalir is earlier and most probably 7th, maybe 8th century, whatever, in Eretz Yisrael. One of the most prolific and famous poets that he shows up in our kinot, he shows up in our slichot, he shows up in other holy poetry that we have, and the Hoshana, the entire package of Hoshana, that we know that on day 1 we say one stanza, and day 2 another stanza, day 3 another, and so on and so on and so on, until Hoshana Rabbah, we say 7 stanzas. And each stanza, we take the Lulav and Esrog, we walk around the bima, some gentleman holds a Sefer Torah in the middle, and on Hoshana Rabbah, the custom is take out all the Sefer Torah just to upgrade the experience, and we're going 7 times around. All that is Zeichel HaMikdash. In the Beit HaMikdash, they would take the Arba Minim, and they would go around the Mizbeach once every day on Hoshana Rabbah 7 times, and they would drape the Mizbeach with the Aravot, and that's a story in itself why it was just Aravot, but we're not going to get to that now. So this business of the Hakafot around the Mizbeach in Beit HaMikdash becomes the Hakafa around the table that we read the Sefer Torah, and the Sefer Torah is there to create a Beit HaMikdash feeling. It's to simulate on some level a Beit HaMikdash feeling. Simulation doesn't have to be exact, right? So I have a flight simulator at home on a computer. It's not exactly an airplane. But 2 weeks ago, my son went to Madrid to sit in a simulator that rocked and made noise and everything. That simulated everything you should know about the real thing before you go into the real thing. So there's different levels of simulation. So the simulation of, let's say, the Beit HaMikdash, as if to say, that was built in the second Beit HaMikdash era in Alexandria, known as Beit Chonyo. There was a carbon copy of Beit HaMikdash built, and it's a history in itself, mentioned in the Mishnah in the end of Masechet Menachot. That was a simulated Beit HaMikdash. It looked like Beit HaMikdash. They did everything that Beit HaMikdash did. And the question was, how the halacha related to such kohanim who are functioning outside the framework of the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. So you can have a simulated Beit HaMikdash on a perfect level, but you can have a simulated Beit HaMikdash on a very, very low level. So that's what we do. We take out the Sefer Torah, some gentleman stands in the middle with it, and we're simulating the Beit HaMikdash, and we're doing the Hakafah as if it's Beit HaMikdash, and it's all Zeicha LaMikdash. You should remember what was done at the time of Beit HaMikdash, and in Beit HaMikdash on Hoshana Rabbah they went 7 times, and we go 7 times, and so on. It's a little bit of a prelude to the Hakafot of Simchat Torah, but not necessarily. Beseda. So that's what we do with our lulav and etrog. Now, what we also do, as we go around, we say the Tefillah of Hoshana. Because the Gemara Masechet Ta'anit, Daf Bet, the beginning of the Masechet, teaches us that what's behind, what governs the mitzvah of the 4 species, it's an indirect prayer for rain. We take 4 of the one nice fruit, and other things that grew, the date palm, fruit is also palm, and the other growths and vegetation and greenery, the hadas and the arava, but all 4 require ample amount of rain for them to grow nicely. So that's what we're taking. And therefore, if the etrog is dried out, it's from last year, or the arava is already banged up, it's like a klapta hashana, as we say, it's banged up, you can't use it. You have to use fresh. And that's why the Mishnah says, Lulav hayavesh and etrog hayavesh, arava yavesha, they're disqualified. You want to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, take a look at these beautiful pieces of vegetation and fruit. This is what we want for next year. In other words, you get a good idea. Now, I'm not saying the word rain at all. The word rain, don't say a word, because it's first day, second day, third day of Sukkot. We want to sit in the Sukkah. And that's why we delay Mashav Ruach Morid Ha Geshem. Geshem. Don't say that the first 6 days. The first 7 days, don't say it. We say it on the 8th day where you can sit you don't have to sit in the Sukkah. Fine. So you have this indirect feeler for rain. But what we do is, Hatzilu, help us. And the words that I use is Hoshana. It's 2 words. We call it Hoshana. It's Hoshana. From the word Hoshia. Ana Hashem Hoshiana. Ana Hashem Hoshiana. So Hoshiana is also Hoshana. So many times in our tefillot, we have this in Slichot, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should help us in the schut of A, in the schut of B, in the schut of Abraham, in the schut of Yitzchak, in the schut of Yaakov, in the schut of his great name. I mean, we say this in Avinu Malkeinu also. Aseh leman shimcha gadol v'norah, aseh leman rachamecha. And the Elazar Kalir, who composed the entire poem of Hoshana, and now we just slice it up until 6 component parts for the first 6 days. And then the 7th day, we say them all, except for Shabbat, that has its own poem. What we're going to do in Hoshana, basically, is beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu for rain. So in the first day, Leman Amitach, Leman Britach, it's all Aleph Bet. Just listen to it. Leman Godlach v'Tifratach, Leman Datach, Leman Hodach, Leman V'utach. These are the Hoshana of day 1. And it's all nicknames of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, characteristics of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The second day, it's Leman Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim has 70 names of Yerushalayim. But the poet here just used 22 because he's doing Aleph Bet. Even Shtiyah, Beit Abchira, Goren Ornan, Dvar Mutzna, Hara Moria, Vehar Yera'eh, Zvul Beit Tifartecha, Chona David, Tov HaLevanon. It's all Beit HaMikdash. And what we do is we say, Hoshana, Even Shtiyah Hoshana, Hoshana, Beit Abchira Hoshana, Hoshana, Goren Ornan Hoshana. This all begins when the Chazan starts Hoshana lemancha Elokeinu Hoshana. Help us in the name of you Elokeinu. Lemancha Boreinu Hoshana. Hoshana lemancha Goalenu Dorshenu. Those first 4 lines, and then we get going with the hakafa. Yavaksha.
Just to go back,
Yeah.
Hoshanas, you said have to be fresh. Is that every day? Because they usually dry out and droop.
You have to know how to keep them fresh. So the question is, what's considered dry? So on day 2, halachically, it's not dry yet. It might be dry by the 7th day if you don't know what to do with it. If you take it out every day and you put it in a wet towel and put it in the refrigerator, I guarantee you by Shana Rabbah it's still going to be fresh. Dry is brittle. Dry is when keep it in the house for 3 months and break it. You'll see that's called brittle is dry. Okay. But many people change their aravot 2 or 3 times during Sukkot so that it's really fresh. And the hadassim, they remain pretty fresh. Of course, if you just put it in a little vase of water each day, it's going to remain fresh and so on. The lulav and esrog stay fresh for the week anyway, and so on. Yofi. So each day we do something else. The theme of the second day is Yerushalayim and Beit HaMikdash. The third day, the theme is Am Yisrael, Omani Choma, Barak HaChama, Gola V'Surah. These are all phrases in Tanakh that the Chazal is a tribute to Klal Yisrael. And then we get back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Adon HaMoshiach, Bilticha Ein Lahoshia, Gibor V'Rav Lahoshia. Where does that come from? Shmona Esrei. Ata Gibor L'Olam Hashem Mechayem Eitim Ata Rav Lahoshia. So it's you can see that this third, it's actually the 4th day, Adon HaMoshiach, is already reflecting the bracha that we include Mashavuruch Umord HaGeshem. And then comes the next one is Adamu Beimah. This we say on Hoshana Rabbah. It's for mankind, the Kadosh Baruch Hu, because not just Jews need rain, human beings need rain, animals need rain. Adamu Beimah, Hoshana, Basar V'Ruach Uneshama, Hoshana, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then we turn to the land itself, which God forbid the vegetation can be ruined, the agriculture can be ruined with all kinds of things that can happen. Adama me'erer means a curse. Beimah mishakelet, goren migazam, dagan midaleket, and so on. Zayit mineshel, chita michagav. Can be grasshoppers, can be all kinds of things that happen on the field that can ruin your crops. So we ask Kadosh Baruch Hu, prevent A, B, C, and D. So it all has to do with looking at the coming agricultural year, the rainfall, and the last one that we do on Hoshana Rabbah is in the schut of Abraham Avinu, in the schut of Yitzchak, and schut of Yaakov, but it's all poetic. Leman eitan hanizrak bilahav eish. For the schut of Eitan Ezrachi is Avraham Avinu, who was thrown into the furnace. That was the medrash that talks about this. Leman ben hanekad al eitzim va'esh. That's Yitzchak and the Akedah. Leman gibor hanevakim sar esh. Yaakov battling the Malach, and so on and so on and so on. And we get to those where you have to cry. Leman kidoshim mushlachim be'esh. Believe me, you have to cry. Leman shimimot ircha, that destroyed your city, hasrufa be'esh. It's a powerful, powerful poem. And that's where we end the Hoshana Rabbah series.
Why is the theme Aish?
He decided to use Aish. I don't know why. Because he wanted to, each one ends up with a rhyme scheme. So this is his rhyme scheme, using Aish, and it's the last day, it's Hoshana Rabbah, and it's the last Hakafa, and on the Mizbeach, there was Aish. Aish tamid tukar ala Mizbeach, lo tichpeh. It could be, yeah. Fire's the opposite of rain, okay, but the Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the Shamayim, Aish Umayim. The Shamayim is a contraction of 2 words. So fire is good in certain circumstances, and Mayim is good in certain circumstances, and fire is destructive, and water is destructive. So we want rain, how do we say it? Bi'ito, in its time. V'tein talu matar livracha. And if you go to a Sephardi shul, they say livracha. Oh, that's right, livracha. Yeah, because of cultural integration. When I heard it in Beersheba, I still continue saying it, livracha. That's right, livracha. So now, on Shabbat, you're not allowed to really daven in the spirit of tchina, what's called supplication. Shabbos, the whole spirit of davening is different. So therefore, we don't have a hakafa because we're not holding a lulav and esrog on Shabbat, and therefore we don't take out the Sefer Torah because we don't have to simulate the Beit HaMikdash. But nevertheless, there is a piyut that simply says, Hoshana, Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us in the schut of Shabbat. We're keeping Shabbat today. All right. So remember, in the old days, in tax forms, there used to be a short form and a long form. The long form was the itemized form. The short form was, here, this is what I earned, this is what I pay taxes, Shalom OUisrael. You sign it, you send it in, nobody's going to bother you. The itemized form is because you want deductions. So you have to itemize this, that, all your charities, blah, 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 blah. So here, instead of just saying Leman Shabbat, Hoshana, let's break it down into its component parts. How many component parts? 22, because he's a poet. And everything is going to be according to the alphabet. So he needs 22 lines for this. Now, this particular poem, I remember using in Beersheba in my class in 8th grade to teach Dinei Shabbat. Because, Dinim it was probably the most boring subject to teach in a classroom. So much so, I remember my daughter told me once in the Chorev school, what they did was they assigned chapters of the Shmirat Shabbat Kilchata, and on Sunday morning there was a quiz. There was a bochan. That's how the teacher taught it. I said, it's crazy. The kids are responsible to go through the material. It's an easy read, actually. It reads nicely in Hebrew. And then, they're going to have a test on it, and that's how the teacher says, okay, I taught dinim. If you take any sefer, Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's not a stimulating type of learning. So what I would do is use actually two different sources. One is Sheilotu Tshuvot, responsa literature. Rav Moshe Feinstein got a shaila about something. Now, let's see how he analyzes it. What sources does he bring in? What fundamentals of Shabbat does he use it? So we're not teaching Shabbat in order of the laws, the 36 9 malachot. No, but we're doing it through some type of action-packed shaila. So do you say, Rav Moshe Feinstein, do you say goimel after an air flight? It's a great shaila because the answer is yes, no, or maybe. So, right? So it becomes an active type of study. So one of the things that I would use to teach Shabbat was exactly what we're doing here, using poetry. And one of them was this very poem. So let's look at it. Om Netzura Kevavat. So before and after is the word Hoshana. I decided to skip the printing the word Hoshana. On Shabbat, the Chazan will say, Hoshana Om Netzura Kevavat. Hoshana. Om means Ummah. It means nation. The nation. Netzura Kevavat. So Rivka already jumped the gun and said, we heard something like this. Look at source number 1 from Dro Yikra. We did the poem already, Dro Yikra, from Dunash. Right? Dro Yikra Levein Imbad. Ve'yin sorchem kimo vavat. He watches us over like a hawkeye. It came from the phrase bat ayin, the pupil of the eye. Kadosh Baruch Hu is looking at us, focusing his attention and guarding us. And you see that this idea, Netzura Kevavat, which on that page from Dro Yikra, I showed sources from Sefer Zechariah. So not only did the Dunash in the 10th century use this, but in the 7th century, Elazar Kalir uses it as well. Om Netzura Kevavat. God is watching over us like a hawkeye. Bonenet bidat nefesh mishivat. Bonenet from the word bina. Now let's just predicate. There are 3 levels of intelligence. Some people have none of them. Some people have some of them. Okay. The chokhmah, bina, and dat. Now when we say the bracha, the 4th bracha of Shmoneh Esrei every day, Ata chonein l'navdad, so we end with choneinu mi'etcha. Now it depends if you daven Sfard or Ashkenaz. Choneinu lefi nusach Sfard at Ari, de chokhmah, bina, and dat. That's Chabad, the letters of Chabad. And if you daven Ashkenaz, you say Dea, Bina, V'Haskel. But take a look at source number, where is it? Did I put it here? Yeah, source number 8 on the second page. I lifted from the Rambam, his Nusach HaTfilah. He's a Sephardi, right? Ata choneinu dat, Mlamed Lenish Bina, V'choneinu mi'etcha, Dea, Chochma, Bina, V'Haskel. What did he do here? He made Shalom Bayit between the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim. He got it all in. We're actually, there's no contradiction between Chochma Bina V'Dat or Dea Bina V'Haskel. It's just the other direction. Sechel is the Chochma. So whether you say Sechel at the end or Sechel at the beginning, that was the difference between the Ashkenaz and Sephardim. So what is Chokhmah? Chokhmah is absolute knowledge. You study things, you register it in your memory cells, and hopefully one day you'll be able to recall it, hopefully. So that's called Chokhmah, your encyclopedia that you have stacked up in your head. Bina is the ability to analyze, what Chazal called Lomed Davar Mitoch Davar, or it's analysis, just to be able to go from A to B. A now looks like B, so maybe we can learn something from B and bring it back to A. You analyze something. De'ah or da'at means practical application. So if you get a shaila, if Rav Moshe Feinstein gets a shaila about kashering a microwave oven for Pesach, or let's say using it for chalavi and bisari, I guarantee you the Rambam didn't say a word about microwave ovens, nor did Rabbi Yosef Karo in Shulchan Aruch. So I'm stuck. So what do? I mean, that's the famous story of the boy who went for a smicha test, and the Rosh Yeshiva said, so what happens if the fleshik fork falls into a milking pot? He says, I don't know. Shulchan Aruch, it talks about a spoon. So I'm not supposed to know, right? So there's no microwave. But what you have to do is snuff out the principles of kashrut from the Gemara Masechet Chulin, from the Rambam, from the Shulchan Aruch, and then apply it to your shaila. That's why the section of Shulchan Aruch that's applied halacha is called Yoredeya. It's called Yoredeya because they're operating with dot. That's all, and that's what's important. So we ask Kadosh Baruch Hu, we need all three to get through life and to get through Torah study. Some people are stronger in one as opposed to the other. We know that there are Roshei Yeshiva who are great analysts in the way they give the shir, but you never in the world, you wouldn't ask him a shaila and halacha. You want somebody else. So people can have a posek a rav for study and a rav for psak. It's in Pirkei Avot. It says aseh l'charav, and a few lines down, aseh l'charav. And the Rambam tells us in the Mishnah commentary, there are two different types of teachers. One will guide you how to study, and one will give you the practical application. There's nothing wrong with that. There were plenty of people who came to the Rav Shir, but came to a shaila, they asked Rav Moshe Feinstein. It was okay. It was okay. The Rav once said that how ironic it was when people referred to Rav Moshe Feinstein, they talked to him, they called him the Rosh Yeshiva. And when they talked to the Rav, he was the Rav, even though the roles were just the opposite. The Rav said, he once commented, it was ironic. But you have here three different modes. So going back to the poem, Bina in Dat. Dat means religion. Doesn't mean religion. It means the Torah. Dat here means Dat, the Torah itself. Who we analyze the Torah, meaning the Chumash, the Parshat HaShavua. Nefesh Mishiva. So look at source number 2. This comes right out of Tilim Yutet. Torat Hashem Tmima Mishivat Nafesh. So the phrase Mishivat Nafesh, it calms me, it regulates me, and so on. It puts me on the right, proper standing. The poet Kalir takes it from that pasuk. Dat Nefesh Mishiva is Torat Hashem Tmima Mishivat Nafesh. On Shabbat, I'm supposed to upgrade my Torah involvement because during the week we're busy working. So you have a few tastings of Torah in your siddur as part of your davening. Maybe you go to a shir at night. Maybe you listen to a daf yomi on the internet. Whatever. But Shabbos is supposed to be more involved. So it expresses itself in Kriyat Torah. Later, he's going to say it. If you look at the letter Shin, 2 lines from the end of this poem, Shiv'a Badat Korah b'Shabbat. We call 7 people to the Torah on Shabbat. Of course, we call 3 on Monday and Thursday, 4 on Rosh Chodesh or Chol HaMoed, 5 on Yom Tov, 6 on Yom Kippur, and 7 on Shabbat. And that's not an accident. This is a gauge for levels of Kedushat Hayom, sanctity of the day. Sanctity of the day. So we know the weekday, there's no sanctity of the day. It's weekday. It's Chol. Mavdil ben Kodesh l'Chol. So the minimum is 3 aliyot, the Gemara says, because Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. Fine. So we have the bare minimum aliyot in the Torah. That comes from the days of Ezra HaSofer. 2,500 years ago, you had to have at least 3 aliyot for a bona fide laning. Kohen, Levi, Yisrael. But then you want to indicate that today is special. So Rosh Chodesh is a little special. Chol HaMoed a little special. There happens to be a little bit more Kedushat Hayom on Chol HaMoed than Rosh Chodesh, but in Beit HaMikdash, Rosh Chodesh was also a quasi Yom Tov, as it says in Parshat Balotcha, Uviyom Simchatchem, Uvamoadechem, Uvarashei Chodshechem, Utkatem B'chatzatzot Alorotechem V'Zivchei Shamechem. So Rosh Chodesh is in Beit HaMikdash is also a Yom Tov. That's why the people who wear tefillin, I'm being very careful here with my gender, being gender correct. The people who wear tefillin in shul in the morning take the tefillin off for Musaf on Rosh Chodesh. And for those Ashkenazim in Chutz La'aretz who wore tefillin on Chol Hamoed, irrelevant for Israel, no one wears tefillin here on Chol Hamoed, but those who had the view of the Ramah in Chutz La'aretz and wore tefillin on Chol Hamoed took the tefillin off for Musaf, because Musaf is a simulation of Beit HaMikdash spirit. It's the idea that we daven and in lieu of the Korban. That's what the Musaf is all about, right? We say it in the Musaf itself. We even quote from Parshat Pinchas what the Musaf is. And so on, so on, so on. We specify the exact Korban Musaf as if Beit HaMikdash was around. We ask Kadosh Baruch Hu, give us the chance, and we'll love to do it. So if there's a spirit of the Musaf going on in shul at the time of Musaf, and by the way, there are some opinions in the Mishnah that you can only daven Musaf with a minyan. We don't paskin like that. So our psak is that even if somebody's home on Rosh Chodesh and you can't get to shul, you can still daven Musaf. But there's a view that says Musaf only with a minyan, because Beit HaMikdash is only Klal Yisrael. And a minyan isn't 10 Jews. A minyan is a delegation of Klal Yisrael. So that's why Musaf might require a minyan. And that's why we take the tefillin off on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed for those who are wearing tefillin on Chol Hamoed, because it's the spirit of Yom Tov that's going on. There's no tefillin in Yom Tov. And that's why there are 4 aliyos on both Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed. And then Yom Tov has 5 aliyot. There's more Kedushat Yom, because there are things that are prohibited on Yom Tov, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, and Rosh Hashanah that are permissible on Rosh Chodesh and Chol Hamoed. And then the higher degree is actually Yom Kippur. People might erroneously think that the most holy day of the year is Yom Kippur. It's not true. It's Shabbat. And I'll prove to you twice that Yom Kippur, the prohibitions are there, and they're equivalent to the prohibitions of Shabbat, except that if somebody violates something on Yom Kippur, it's not a capital punishment offense. It's only karet, only karet. It means a loss of olam haba, according to the Rambam, the premature dying, and so on. Not a good thing to get into, but it's not a capital punishment offense. Chilul Shabbat is a capital punishment offense. So Yom Kippur is 6 aliyot, Shabbos is 7 aliyot, and the schedule of the punishments is also a gauge for if a person does the same thing. He writes 2 letters on Shabbat, the days that there was a Beit Din. It's a capital punishment offense. Does the same thing in Yom Kippur, it's karet. Does the same thing on Yom Tov, it's only malkot. It's a lower order of an avera on Yom Tov than on Yom Kippur, and Yom Kippur is lower order than on Shabbat. So this reflects itself in the Kriyat Torah. So the maximum is 7. Now, of course, 7 is 7 Shabbat. You can't miss the point. So it says Shiv'a Badat. We read Korah b'Shabbat. We read 7 people, 7 aliyot on Shabbat. So this is, but it's not just to read. The word Kuf Resh Aleph, Kri'ah, in rabbinic language means the reading of Torah Shebechtav, just reading. But the word Bonenet means already digging in, because we're not just supposed to read it and not have a clue what we're saying. Ezra HaSofer instituted that there should be meturgaman, there should be translation. So they used to read it with onkelos, with the Chumash. And till this very day, in the Yemenite communities, they still do that. The problem is that most people in Europe in the Middle Ages became so ignorant to the Aramaic that you'd need a translation of the translation. So what do we gain by reading onkelos if it's Chinese to most people? More people understand the original Hebrew than they would understand the translation. Here comes the invention called the Shabbos Drasha of the Rav of the community. What he's supposed to do is take something from the parsha and expand on it beyond what the average person in shul. Now, if the Rav gets up there and he says, here's a pasuk, Rashi says such and such, Shkoyach, Mashiach should come b'mheira b'yameinu. That's a wasted drasha, because most people know the Rashi. But if he comes and he says the Rashi, and he says, you thought you understood Rashi, and I'm going to show you why you didn't understand anything, and I'm going to introduce a novel idea, that's a nice drasha. That's a nice drasha. And if he says a good story to go along with it, it's even better. And a nice joke to open up, that's even better. There's an art of how to put together a Shabbos drasha. But the idea of expanding, taking it back to the original idea, Rabbi Riskin in his Lincoln Square synagogue, way before he came in Aliyah, but it's still in vogue today, the Baal Koreh stops after each Aliyah, and before he gets to the next Aliyah, somebody gets up and explains the content of the Aliyah. Because in his community, he couldn't assume that everybody knew what was going on. So today you have Torah tidbits from the OU, right? There's a summary. Phil Chernovsky started this many years ago, and it's kept up. So you have a summary. You can have it next to you during Kriyas Torah. So while they're busy making the Mishabeirachs and everything, and half the people talking during the Ben Gavra, the Gavra between one Ali and the other, you just take a look at what's the topic, what's the subject, and that's what is really bonenet bidat nefesh mishiva. Not only to hear and be involved in the Kriyat Torah, but to peel back a little bit the superficiality of it, and let's get into it and understand it. Gomeret Hilchot Shabbat. What does that mean? It doesn't mean Gomeret, he completed. Nobody ever completes learning, by the way. That's why the Rav had an allergic reaction to Siyum Masechet. You have a sensation of finishing, but Torah, you never finish. But that's why the minhag is, whenever you do a Siyum, you always start the next Mishnah or next Masechet, just to show. But the Rav did attend Siyumim for Balabatim because he didn't want to disappoint them. Because they wanted to make a siyum, so okay, beseda. But he didn't go for it too much, even though it's an authorized sudat mitzvah. Even in the 9 days, you can have bisari and you can have wine and so on. Of course, I remember the misusing of that particular halacha with the hotels in the Catskills inviting a rabbi every night of the 9 days to make a siyum and then inviting the 500 guests to join them. Shulchan Aruch says very clearly you can have it and invite only the people you would normally invite in the middle of the winter, to a siyum. And you wouldn't be inviting these total strangers, at these hotels. So Ramesh Feinstein was very much against that. Yeah, because the Lubavitch Rebbe had a different take. He said all learning in the 9 days should be increased with siyums as a promotion for Beit HaMikdash. And okay, Beseda, so Lubavitch saw it differently. So now, Doreshet Masot Shabbat. Masot means carrying on Shabbat. So carrying on Shabbat is just one of the 39 melachot, right? Okay, carrying. So how much are you allowed to carry? If you have, let's say a hair falls out of your head. It happens sometimes, right? And lands on your jacket or dress or whatever. And you didn't notice it. Is that called carrying on Shabbat? You got to shul and all of a sudden, little dandruff, I was carrying on Shabbat. If the Beit HaMikdash have to bring a korban chatos, no, I want to calm you down. There's a measure of how much the quantity of what you're carrying to be called carrying. So what's the quantity? The quantity is the volume of a date, of a fig. Okay? Now, fig is not a small fruit. It's not a large fruit. It's not a, pomelo, but it's bechol, it's more than a dandruff, right? More than a flake of dandruff, right? So if a flake of snow falls on you on Shabbos, and it even melts, and don't worry, you're not carrying. Right? I mean, that's the famous story of the two guys, Balabatim, who were learning. They worked the whole day, okay? And they had the chavrusa at night. 30 years they're learning together, chavrusa. It's very, very nice. And somehow or another, out of nowhere, 30 years, it came out in conversation. He said, by the way, you know that I'm not Jewish. What? It's not Jewish. We're learning Gemara 30 years together. You're a Shema Shabbos, everything that works. He said, no. Every year I take a little bobby pin, I put it in my pocket, and I go out. She says, yeah, but there's an Erev here. He says, I don't hold from the Erev. So the question is, what's the minimum quantity? It's a fig. That's what it is. So the word drash means to investigate in the world of Torah Shebal Peh. That's why we call it a drasha. A drasha, the word doresh in the Torah actually means seek out. Dirshu Hashem b'yimotzo. It says, L'shichno tidrishu uvat hashama. Seek out the place of Beit HaMikdash. But in the case of Torah study, dig with the tradition of the oral law. And if you just take a look at the source number 6 on the second page on top, it's the pasuk by Moshe Rabbeinu. It's after Aaron's sons, Nadav and Avihu, died on opening day of the Mishkan, and the 8 Seir HaChatat, the goat of the Korban Chatat, Darash Moshe. Moshe Rabbeinu was like trying to figure out what should be done. Should it be eaten by the Kohen, who's an Onain? Aaron was an Onain, and after the burial he becomes an Avel. Was he allowed to eat it or not? And before he has the psak clear in his head, the Hinei Soraf, they burned it, which means Aaron HaKohen wasn't going to eat it. Vayiksof al Elazar v'alitamar b'nei Aaron anotarim lemor, and Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. Why'd you burn it? Why don't you wait for the halacha, and maybe you're supposed to eat it and not burn it? And why it doesn't say Aaron? Because of kavod that he had for his brother. So he lets it out on the 2 sons, Elazar and Itamar, that burnt this korban. So look at Rashi in source number 7. Darosh Darash. Why does it say twice? Shtei drishot halalu. There were 2 items on his agenda. Mipnei ma nisraf zeh. Why was it burnt? Mipnei ma lo ochlu elu. Why didn't they eat it? He had 2 questions in his mind, and therefore it was a double compounded drisha. But you see that the word drisha is a halachic inquiry and investigation. So back in the poem, Doreshet Masot Shabbat, there has to be an investigation to what Shabbat is. And if you look at source number 4, it says Hamutzi Ochlim Ki Grogeret. Grogeret is a te'ena, is a fig. Chayav. You would be obligated. You would be violating Shabbat if the carrying was at least the size of the volume of a te'ena, of a fig, 1 fig. So this demands drisha. Now there's also something else that goes with this. Look at source 5. Source 5 says, Ma'avir arba amot b'reshut harabim. You're not allowed to carry something 4 amot. How much is 4 amot? So you know the answer. It's a machloket, right? So it's between 6 and 8 feet, the way we used to measure in the Altaheim, in the good old home, which is not a tremendous distance, right? It's from where I'm sitting maybe to the door, and not much more than that. Now, the principal problem of carrying in Shabbat is taking from one domain to another domain. So how many domains are there in the laws of Shabbat? So he has this here too, on the letter Pei. Look down, scroll down with your eyes to the letter Pei. Poretet arba rishuyot b'Shabbat. You detail, from the word prat, you itemize, you detail the 4 halachically prescribed zones. Let's use the word zones. So the 2 principal ones are public zone and private zone. Reshut Rabim, Reshut Yachid. Yafeh, okay. But there are 2 intermediary zones. So we know that from a biblical point of view, you're not allowed to take something from your private zone. Private zone would be your house. And there's a definition of a private zone. It's at least 4 amot by 4 amot. So figure that out. Make it, let's say, 8 feet, multiply by 4, 32 feet by 32 feet, shatach's area. And there has to be at least a wall of 10 amot, which is about 1 meter, the height of this table, even if it doesn't have a roof. That's called Reshut HaYachid. From Reshut HaYachid, you're now allowed to carry out to Reshut HaRabim. So what is Reshut HaRabim? Right, it's a machloket, right? So according to the Rambam, it's a place that it has to be at least, it's a span of tremendous amount of amot, by the way. But there are some streets that fit the bill. Most public thoroughfares would fit the bill, like Stroat Herzl. It's very wide, and so on. I forgot what was it, 30 some odd amot that has to be wide. And it has to be, not a dead end. It has to be open on both ends. That's according to the Rambam. Plenty of places in the world, in Israel, in the world, that would qualify. Rashi says, in order to qualify for Reshut HaRabim, you have to have a place that 600,000 people walk on every day. Now, that's not going to be a lot of places in the world. Maybe Times Square on lunchtime. Or Ocean Park, right? That was the question that Rav Moshe Feinstein raised with regard to the Eruv around Flatbush. Because if the Reshut HaRabim is the Oraita, biblical, you can have 1,000 Erevs around, it doesn't work, it doesn't help. It's only in this intermediary stage where Chazal or Chachamim limited the carrying on a rabbinic level, and it's called the Carmelit. So according to Rashi and most of those who went along with him, that view says that yes, that most of the problem of carrying is a problem of rabbinic. And a problem of rabbinic, we can put a sign up, and the sign becomes the Erev. The Erev says, Adkan, till here, you can walk with something in your pocket or something in your hand, and so on. Beyond that, you can't walk. Fine. So that's most places. But if you believe in the view of the Rambam, most places you can't put an Erev. If it's a backyard, you can put an Erev. Fine. It doesn't have the width that the Rambam was talking about. But and some streets in some local neighborhoods, perhaps, but not major thoroughfares. I remember in Ramot, so in certain communities, they put up their own Erev because they thought that maybe the main road, which is now the road Golda Meir, would qualify as Shut Rabbim according to the Rambam, and so on. And there are people in Yerushalayim who, quote unquote, don't hold from the Erev in terms of the Rabbanut. They simply have the Chumrah of the Rambam's view, like Rav Lichtenstein Zatzal, who had the Chumrah of the Rambam's view, and therefore didn't carry in places in the open city. But in a place like a Lunchfoot, you could carry because there you don't have any street does not qualify, even according to the Rambam, as Rishut Rabbim. So now you have this third intermediary zone. It's called Carmelit. And the fourth zone is smaller than Rishut HaYachid, smaller than the inside of a water pipe. The inside of a water pipe is smaller than, it's called Makom Pator. Makom Pator means all bets are off, you can do whatever you want. You can have things from Rishut HaYachid to Makom Pator, Rishut Rabbim, Makom Pator, and that's why you're allowed to flush the toilet, and it goes out to public area because the pipe itself is called Makom Pator. Fine, so you have four regions. Now the Mishnah in the beginning of Masechet Shabbat says, Yitziot HaShabbat Shtayim Shehein Arba. There are two which are really four, inside and Shtayim Shehein Arba. Outside, I'm not going to bore you with what the Mishnah did with a line of Chazal that was rewritten in the Mishnah of Masechet Shabbat. The Mishnah originally, and it's found in the beginning of Masechet Shvuot, Yitziot HaShabbat Shtayim Shehein Arba. And what does the word Yitziot mean? There's a variant reading to it that's actually found in the Gemara Masechet Shabbat Daf Bet, Rishuyot HaShabbat. And the poet here uses it where he says, Poretet Arba Rishuyot B'Shabbat. The Mishnah there is what says Yitziot HaShabbat Shtayim Shein Arba means to say there are four domains, really two that expand into four. The two basic ones are the public and private zones, but now, and those are biblical, and the private, the ones that are biblical, rabbinic, is the Carmelit, and one is not even rabbinic, and that's the Makom Pator. So the two really become four. So why don't you just say they're four? Because the two are the primary ones, and then they expand into four. Where did Chachamim get this interesting idea of two which are four, which the Mishnah in Masechet Shvuot says about three other halachot, without getting into it? Shvuot Shtayim Shein Arba, Marot Nigaim Shnayim Shein Arba, Yidiot HaTumah Shtayim Shein Arba, and then each relevant place it expands what the two which become four. It all comes from the Mizbeach. The most popular korban in the Mizbeach was a korban shlomim that people would bring, and the Kohen had to sprinkle the blood on two opposite corners of the Mizbeach so that the blood spread out to all four sides. And the Mishnah says, Shtei matanot shehein arba. The word matanot doesn't mean a gift, it means sprinkling. V'natan Aharon, in the biblical sense, in Parshat Vayikra. So the V'natan Aharon is rewritten by the Mishnah, Shtei matanot shehein arba. Two sprinklings, but actually spread out to four. And Chazal like that. Two which are four. So two which are four are used four different times in halacha. They have nothing to do with each other except the usage of Shtayim Shehein Arba, and they all come from the same source in the Mizbeach, which is just a nice way of remembering things. And one is Yitziot HaShabbat Shtayim Shehein Arba, and the basic source was Rishuyot HaShabbat Shtayim Shehein Arba. So here you have the idea of Poretet Arba Rishuyot B'Shabbat, and you have the idea of the Reshet Mas'od Shabbat of the Dalid, and we also had it with regard to, what was the other one? We mentioned three times. We mentioned already. Gomeret Hilchot Shabbat. the idea of Gomeret Hilchot Shabbat. Look at source number 5. So this business of Mavir Arba Amot Bereshut Harabim, that not only are now allowed to transfer things from the private domain to the public domain, or public domain to private domain, but you're now allowed to carry something 4 Amot in Reshut Harabim. You see something in Reshut Harabim, you're now allowed to pick it up and carry it 4 Amot and then put it down. That would be a biblical offense. How do you know that? So the Gemara says, Kol Arba Amot Bereshut Harabim, Gemara Gemirala. The word Gemara means tradition. It's an oral tradition. It's halacha leMoshe Misinai. An oral tradition from Moshe Rabbeinu. There's no source for it. So therefore, if we go back to the poem of Bet, Gimel, and Dalid, Bonenet Bidat Nefesh Mishivat, he's talking about study of the written law of Chumash, just to get a little bit beyond the superficiality. Gomeret Hilchot Shabbat, he's studying the traditions of Hilchot Shabbat, and Doreshet Mas'at Shabbat, he's going to investigate by using the tools of halachic investigation, the drash. He's got it all in there. And I think it's fabulous. And then he says, Hakovat Alpayim Tchum Shabbat. Now, 1 second. Why does he just flush out Tchum Shabbat as an example? Well, you're not allowed to walk more than 2,000 amot outside the perimeter of your city. So that works out to about 1.6 kilometers from your house. Okay, most people, if they're healthy, they can walk 1.6 kilometers. I mean, I walk 1 kilometer to Al Nechama, and if I forgot my talus, I'd have to come home. I can walk it again. So you can do these things. So you're not allowed to walk more than 1.6 kilometers outside your home. Of course, if you put up an Erev Tchumen on Erev Shabbos, at that point, you can walk another 1.6 kilometers, and that doubles your walking space. I learned about Tchum Shabbat very young as a child, because we lived in Washington Heights area of New York, and we used the George Washington Bridge for Tashlich. And we were told you can't walk to the second tower because it's beyond Tchum Shabbat. You could walk on the bridge. There was a pedestrian. No, we do a Rosh Hashanah, but Tchum Shabbat is applicable for Yom Tov as well. So that's why we were taught as kids, you can walk past the first tower, you can't walk past the second tower. And there was when the new communities began developing in New Jersey, this is PT, pre-Teaneck, before there was such an invention called Teaneck, New Jersey, and Englewood, New Jersey, and so on. Fort Lee, right over the bridge. I was just there for a Shabbos 2 months ago. Fort Lee, right over the bridge, was the first community. So there was a Brit on Shabbat, and they didn't have a moil. So the moil from Washington Heights, they invited him for Shabbat. He didn't want to come. He wanted to be with his family, but he was willing to walk the bridge. So they said that he had to make a Tchum Erev. I remember they had to make an Erev Tchumen before the second tower on the bridge, so he'd be able to, which means put on a sandwich, put down some food, and as if you live there, as if you have extended the border of the city. It's a halacha gimmick, of course. You've extended the border of the city, and you're now walking another 2,000 amot, and he was able to go to Fort Lee, New Jersey. And then Friday, Motzei Shabbos, he got a ride home. But he picked up a sandwich on the way, like Baltashkas, got to eat it. He didn't walk home. He got a ride home, Motzei Shabbos, yeah. But this is how Kovat Tchum Shabbat. Okay, is this midoraita? Is this biblical? Or is this a rabbinic add-on? Is it part of what? Machloket. You're such a good student. Machloket. The answer to all my questions. It's a machloket. If there wouldn't be machloket, this would be a boring endeavor, right? Right, machloket. So we'll see in a moment what the machloket is. Quite complicated machloket, not even a simple machloket. So first of all, machloket number 1 is this biblical or rabbinic? So we turn the page to source number 9. The word Tchum Shabbat doesn't even appear here, but we're going to see where it appears. It says, "Hamachalel et Shabbat b'davar shechayvim al zdono karet." If you machalel Shabbat on something that if you do it deliberately, you have a chiyuv karet. Of course, there's even a chiyuv execution if there would be a beit din. But if it would be done today, there's a chiyuv karet. You deliberately violate one of the laws of Shabbat. Or al shigagato. If it was done inadvertently, you would have to offer a korban chatat to Beit Mikdash. So then there's ... There are all kinds of things that go on here. And I'm just sticking to this machloket. It says, Rabbi Meir Mechayev Chachamim Potrim. What is this all about? Look at source number 10. Rambam in his Mishnah commentary says, Mishnah Zu le Rabbi Akiva. This Mishnah is according to Rabbi Akiva, shesover, who believes, sheyesh chilul Shabbat, she'ein chayavim al zdono karet val shigagato shchatat. There's actually something about chilul Shabbat that doesn't fit into all the other activities of Shabbat. It's something else. It's a different category. And what is it? Who isur tchumin, the issue of walking 2,000 amot. Lefi she'isur tchumin le Rabbi Akiva d'oraita. Rabbi Akiva believes it's a biblical add-on. It's not part of the 39 melachot. It doesn't conform to the same schedule of punishments. It's different. It would only be malchot, by the way, and it's a biblical isur. It's one of the 613. It's one of the 365 negatives of Tariag mitzvot. But it's biblical. Aval chachamim omrim. Chachamim argue and say isur tchumin is rabbanan. Is only rabbinic add-on. Ve'en korim oto chilul. It's not called chilul Shabbat. Ve'enam korim chilul ela hamlachot bilvad. Only the activities shechayavim al zdonan koret val shigan chatat. Only those are called chilul Shabbat. So if a person violates tchum Shabbat, he's not a tzaddik, but he's not a mechalel Shabbat. And then the Rambam says halacha kechachamim. That seems to tell me that tchum Shabbat is only rabbinic. The only thing is, if you look at source number 11, this is where Rabbi Akiva comes from. The Tani Rabbi Chia, but it's in the name of Rabbi Akiva, Lokin al eruvei tchumin dvar Torah, that you get malkot on eruv tchumin biblically. So here you have a view in the Gemara that tchum Shabbat is a biblical offense. And now let's see what the Rambam says in number 12, in Hilchot Shabbat, in the Mishnah Torah. Hayotzei chutz letchum hamedina b'Shabbat lokeh. You get malkot. Saying 1 second, it's biblical. But in source number 10, he said it was rabbinic. He held like chachamim. Shenemar al yetzei ish b'mkomo b'yom hashvi. The question is, where does this come from? When the man fell in the desert, the Torah says, don't go out on Shabbos to collect it. So some say this is part of the biblical narrative. It has nothing to do with mitzvot, and that's it. But Rabbi Akiva felt not only was part of the biblical narrative, but it came to teach Am Yisrael something for generations to come, not to walk out of your place. So how much is your place? You have to be sealed in your door? You're not to go outside on Shabbat? No, there's a certain measure of distance that you're allowed to go, and that becomes measurable by 2,000 amot, as I said before. So makom zeh utchum ha'ir. You're not to go outside the limits of the city, but in the city you can walk 1,000 miles around and around. V'lo natna Torah shi'ur l'tchum hazeh. The Torah never gave us an amount, a distance amount. Aval chachamim hitiku. Chachamim had a tradition. Shetchum zehu chutz l'shneim asar mil keneged machane Yisrael. Translated, 24,000 amot, which is 12 times 2,000 amot. So the Rambam is now telling us that biblically, you're now allowed to walk about 10 kilometers from your house on Shabbat. That's quite a hike. But rabbinically, 2,000 amot. V'chei chachamar Moshe Rabbeinu lo teitzu chutz lemachaneh. U'midivrei sofrim, but on a rabbinic level, shelo yetzai adam chutz la'ir ela ad alpayim amah. Aval chutz me'alpayim amah, it's asur because there's a reference from the Parashat Mas'eh where it talks about the Arei Miklat and other cities of the Levium. There's a city limit outside of 2,000 amot, which is then applied to Tchum Shabbat. Anyway, what's happening here is the Rambam actually went through 3 stages. Early Rambam believed that this was rabbinic. Later, Rambam changed his mind and he says, no, it's actually biblical, and the biblical distance is 2,000 amot. He says it clearly in his Sefer Mitzvot. He says it clearly. And then he changes his mind further. He says, it's biblical, except the 2,000 amot, the distance is rabbinic. But the amount of 24,000 amot, which is Keneged Machnei Yisrael, that's biblical. Where did he dig that up from? In source number, did I put it here? It actually came from the Talmud Yerushalmi. It came from the Talmud Yerushalmi that gives us this idea that the Machane Yisrael, the width of Am Yisrael in the desert was 12 mil, which is 24,000 amot. And therefore, the idea of outside the distance of the Machane, there were no cities there. The source became Machane Yisrael. This is just another example where the Rambam flips, and he flips basically whether it's rabbinic or biblical, and then he flips again, and he says it's biblical, but it's biblical according to the measure of the Yerushalmi. And that's how the Rambam says it in source number 12, and so on. The one who argues bitterly with the Rambam on all this is the Ramban, and he says, no. You had it right on day one. It's rabbinic. The whole Tchum Shabbat is rabbinic, and so on. Let's just finish the poem quickly. So we said something about Tchum Shabbat. Umishivat regel mishabat. This is the pasuk that many of us actually say at the beginning of Kiddush. Im tashiv Shabbat reglecha. Where did I put it? I'm sure I put it somewhere. In 14. Right, in 14. Im tashiv mishabat reglecha sot chafetzcha v'yom kachi v'karata l'shabbat onek l'tosh mechubad. So it means these are the instructions of Yeshayahu, that there shouldn't be things that are done in a weekday-ish way. We call uvda dechoil. There are certain things that are not clearly mandated as prohibited by Shabbat, but it doesn't look right on Shabbat. In Yiddish, you say it's not Shabbos dik. It's pasnish. It's a little matim the Shabbat, right? Yeah, I can hook up a Shabbos clock to my lights, to my air conditioner, to my heater, and to my television. That doesn't look right. This one is a different story, right? If it's a World Series, it might be Pekuch Nefesh, the Super Bowl, but the Super Bowls never came out on Shabbos, thank God. Right? But the World, I know, I put that. Don't worry. I put it there. Fine, thank you. And Zachor v'Shamor Mekayemet b'Shabbat that we explained last week. Chasha l'maher bi'at Shabbat. I want to bring in Shabbat as quickly, with great enthusiasm, looking forward to Shabbat. Right? Thank God it's Friday. But that's not what this means when they said that. Torachat kol mishishi l'Shabbat. I break my head, break my back, make sure everything's ready on Shabbat, right? Until the last minute sometimes. Yoshevet umamtenet at klo Shabbat. No. You don't wait till the last minute. You're supposed to be sitting and waiting nicely and waiting for Kedushat Shabbat to come in. At klot Shabbat, I'm sorry, to the end of Shabbat. You don't want Shabbos to end. You want to keep sitting and let it ride. Kavod va'onek korah Shabbat. We had this already, the difference, kavod, what we do before Shabbat, to prepare, onik, what we do, and to enjoy. And here comes examples. Levush uksut mechalefet b'Shabbat. We change our clothing for Shabbat. Ma'achal u'mishteh mechina l'Shabbat. You have special menus for Shabbat. Noam megadim. You have special delicacies. Man emet b'Shabbat. Sudot shalosh mekayemet b'Shabbat. 3 sudot, because during the week they used to eat just 2 sudot. So the special add-on was sudash lishit. Al shtei kikarot botzat b'Shabbat. Normally you have 1 piece of bread out there, 1 roll, whatever. On Shabbat you have 2. Is also derived from the man that there were double measure that fell on Friday for Shabbat. Al shtei kikarot botzat Shabbat, right? You have the Lechem Mishnah. Poretet, this we said already, arba shot b'Shabbat. Tzivui hadlakat ner madleket b'Shabbat. We have the mitzvah of lighting candles for Shabbat. Is this kavod Shabbat or is this onik Shabbat that we light Shabbos candles? So whoever says kavod is right, whoever said onik is right, it's both. So the Rambam brings it twice. He brings it in the laws of kavod Shabbat because you have to prepare it on Shabbat. You have to prepare the Nerot Shabbat on Shabbat, and you even have to light it before Shabbat. You have to light it before Shabbat, for sure. You can't light it before Plag HaMincha, which is about an hour and a quarter before sundown. You can't light Shabbos candles at 10 in the morning. It has to be about an hour and a quarter. It has to be within an hour and a quarter before sundown. But our minhag is to light either 40 minutes before sundown in Yerushalayim or 18 to 20 minutes most other places in the world. So you get it done. You have to get it done before sundown because after sundown you can't strike the match anymore. It's already Shabbat. So it's kavod, but its purpose is to enjoy, benefit from the light on Shabbat. Chazal understood that some people are so poor and there's no illumination in their homes during the week, that leads to tension, darkness is tense moment, and so on. Leil Shabbat has to be shlom bayit. So the purpose of the Nerot Shabbat is for Shabbat itself, and it's part of Onik Shabbat as well. Kiddush Hayom Mikadeshet b'Shabbat, a special Kiddush we say Friday night. Renen Shabbat Sheva Mifalelet b'Shabbat. That means the brachot of Shmon Esrei is reduced to 7 brachot, right? And we'll say, we have a minute, we'll say a word about this in a second. Shiv'a bedat korah b'Shabbat, we said this already, 7 aliyot on Shabbat. Tanchilena leyom shekula Shabbat. We ask Kadosh Baruch Hu should bring us to the day, to the era where everything is going to be Shabbat, and that's of course Yemot HaMashiach. Chazal talk about the seventh millennium of being Shabbat, and so on. The idea of the tefillot of Shabbat that are different. So the Shmon Esrei of every weekday, Arvit, Shacharit, and Mincha is identical. But on Shabbat, Arvit is Ata Kidashta Vaychulo Shamayim. The morning is Yismach Moshe B'matnat Chalko, and Mincha is Ata Echad V'Shimcha Echad. So while the core bracha is the same, Ritzei B'Nuchatenu, Kachen B'Totecha, it ends with Makadesh Shabbat. So the Rabban said that they amplify 3 different levels of how we see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Rambam says in Ilchot Yesodei TORAH that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the Yodea, the Yadua, and the Dea Atzma, which means he is the subject of knowledge, he's the object of knowledge, and he's actually the knowledge itself. So on Friday night, we talk about the created world. The created world in objective terms. Ata Kidashta Yom HaShvi. It's the created world. In the morning, we subjectify. It's Moshe Rabbeinu. He's like singular. Yisrach Moshe b'matnat chalko. And by Mincha, we forge them together. Ata echad v'shimcha echad umi kamcha Yisrael goyach habras. I just summarized a shir of 4 hours in the last minute. So therefore, I'll have to one day amplify this further. Okay, we did this poem. Mitzvah Hashem. Next week, another poem.